My name is Vaughn. Now this isn't normally the type of video I post to YouTube. I do a lot of work in self-improvement, bereavement, and healing, and for that you can click the link below to see more about what I do. But for today, and as part of my pandemic project, after having my kitchen countertops and bathroom vanity countertops replaced, I took on the project of repainting all my kitchen cabinets and found out a very important step that I think is going to help you if you're painting your kitchen cabinets too. And hopefully you'll find this information out before you get to the very end of your project like I did. Check it out. So something that I want to show you today is a step that I didn't find out until I had painted the 31 cabinets and drawers for our kitchen and 2 bathroom vanities. So it is a step that I think is really, really important, and I couldn't find a lot of information on YouTube about wet sanding, and specifically I couldn't find anything related to kitchen cabinets. So I thought I'd share what I learned, and if you're just about to start your cabinets, it's a step you might want to consider instead of dry sanding between every layer, and some people don't do that, but wet sanding instead between your top coat, your last sanding and your top coat. If you're like me and you've already completed all of your cupboards painting and you hung them up after curing, and I did cure mine for 3 weeks, and then you see these dark patches, dark and light patches, and there's a real rough texture to the surface, wet sanding will get rid of all or most of it depending on the condition of your cupboards to start with. So a really important step is that it took us a few days to figure out what we were even painting, and it turned out our cupboards are basically a particle board with a melamine finish, and so it was really important the kind of paint we used, the kind of primer we used, and the sanding as well. So as it turned out, we ended up going with the Bullseye 123 primer after trying a basic Behr primer, and paint specifically for melamine cabinets amongst other things, and I was really, really pleased with the result. So again, having said that though, and curing them and reading a lot about how people were really disappointed after hanging their cabinets and kind of going, ooh, I've got these patches, that's when I discovered wet sanding. And to tell you the honest truth, the sandpaper is in the automotive section, so I think they use a lot of wet sanding for polishing cars after painting and things like that. And so I was really afraid to try it because it's not normal to get your cabinets all wet after you have fully painted them. But I decided to just play with it and experiment. And so what I'm going to show you today is what I ended up with after trial and error and redoing all of my cabinets, this one being my 31st and last. So here we go. So to start with, I just want to show you, and up close here, this is sandpaper that I used. It's a 3M package, and I'm using a 1000 grit. And I found it at Home Depot, again in the automotive section. And when you buy your sandpaper, it will say on the back, wet, dry, okay? Wet, dry. And you must have that because normal sandpaper, you can't get wet with the same effect. So what you do is you get a little bit of bucket of water, a little bit of detergent, and again, I filled mine with lukewarm water, put a little splash of detergent in it, and I actually, even though nobody explained why they did that, I think it's to actually help the sandpaper move a little bit more freely. So anyway, I'm going to just show you, we've got a couple of cameras going here, so I'm going to show you some things as up close as possible. So you dip your, see I'm just getting my sandpaper really, really wet, not getting afraid at all to play around with it and get it nice and wet. It does splatter, so make sure you wear your painting clothes. Move anything valuable, put plastic down on the floor and so on. And I want to just share with you, because this is my last cupboard, and I made all my sort of experimental trial and errors with my first, 2, 3, 4 cupboards. by, I'd say, the 5th one, I was super comfortable, and I learned what feel I was going for in the sanding, particularly in the cupboards that you know, had warped wood. And I don't want to make it sound like our cupboards were in really bad shape, but they are 11, 12 years old, and you know, obviously the wood exposed to steam and temperature changes and stuff impacts it. So I will say there were a handful, maybe 4 cupboards, that I had to put lots of elbow grease into the motion that you can see I'm doing right here. And basically, what you'll notice is when you paint your cabinets, okay, and we rolled, by the way, this is the roller we use. It's a 5 mil fiber on the end. And another little trick is to always have a dry roller on hand at the same time, because you can go over it nicely with every coat of paint you do. You can take your dry roller and just go over it again really, really quickly and make sure it stops all the spills and drips and things like that. So back to this cupboard. This one was one of the last few, 3, 4 we did when we tried a dry sanding between the 2nd and 3rd coat. And while it improved the texture, I'm just going around the trim here, the edges, while it improved the texture compared to no sanding between the 2nd and 3rd coat, it still was a little bit rough and doesn't give you that smooth as baby skin that wet sanding is going to give you. So take, you know, relatively small sections to work with, and then you dry it off. Now, another tip I learned from one of the few videos on YouTube where some woman was working with a dresser. She used a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser at this stage to kind of go over it, and it takes a little bit of extra paint off. You'll notice I'm wearing one glove and I keep this hand free so that I can go along and feel wherever I need to touch up. I'm feeling, and I'm telling you right now, you can feel that tapping. Well, if you go into any cabinet store, Home Depot, anybody, IKEA, that sells these basic melamine cabinets that seem to be quite popular, the feel is exactly the same after wet sanding, and that's what you want. So another thing I want to share that I learned, because I was really disappointed with in the beginning, was that painting over melamine, which when you buy a condo, your home or whatever, and you've got melamine cabinets, you have to remember that they have industrial sprayed them. And I actually saw a video on how they do that. And you will never get that look. It's impossible, because any roller you use, foam, brush, leaves the marks that you paint with. And frankly, I was devastated to learn that in the beginning, and I had to adjust my headset to understand I was creating a new product with a new look entirely, and one that was actually going to leave a little bit of the fiber marks of the roller I was using. So they never go away completely, not even with wet sanding. But what the wet sanding does is it, if you will, grinds them into the grain that existed. We're basically taking off a good deal of the top coat of paint, which was our 3rd coat, my 3rd coat. I'm basically taking it off. Some cupboards, as I want to say, were way worse shape than this little baby. This is my bathroom vanity cupboard, and needs very little sanding. But I got it down. I got all of the ones, even the ones that were in rougher shape. I got them down to the same texture. I'm going to get this guy. Also, don't be afraid to swap out your sandpaper. The packs I got came in 5 sheets, and I basically stuck with 1,000 grit, and then used 1,500 for, say, really fine spots that didn't quite feel as smooth as I wanted them to feel. Dry off, and I keep on hand you know, 2, 3, basically cut up old t-shirts from my husband's old collection. Dry it off, dry it off, dry it off. I'm just going to show you how I'm doing that here. Now, if I run my finger along here, I'm going to tell you, I could show you just a little bit. You probably can't really see it on close-up, and that's why it's very hard. Whenever people post videos and pictures of their before and after cabinets, you never see it up close. But I am telling you how smooth that is. It's exactly like the melamine feel of our former cabinets. Look how shiny that is. You can start to feel, when you get used to it, no resistance from the sandpaper. Here, I'm pushing just a little bit harder. It's still not where I want it, so I'm going to keep working at it. And the goal is not to scratch through the paint, which I think curing has helped me with that. So I can't honestly say what this would be like as a step when you are in the process of painting and doing this either between first and second or second and third, depending how many coats you're putting on your cabinets. And I went with 3 because I did a lot of research on top coats and discovered that your third and thin coat of paint is your top coat. So that's why I went with 3 in anticipation of a little bit of rougher wear and tear in the kitchen. So I'm just going around. And again, some people who were sanding and showing this for cars and stuff, or that, another piece of furniture, they went up and down, did circles. I just do a combination, because what's going to happen is the final coat of paint is going to cover all the sanding marks. And it is true and disappointing that the wet sanding still does leave marks. At least they did on my cabinets. You might be luckier and they might not. But on my cabinets, they actually did leave the sanding marks. Didn't scratch anything, but it left the marks. And that's why I ended up having to do the top coat. And I will be honest, you lose a little bit of this beautiful, beautiful, softness when you apply that next coat of paint. It almost seems like you're defeating the purpose, taking off paint, only to apply another coat of paint. But in the next section, when I finish this and it's dried, look see how nice that is? Just beautiful. I'm getting it as close as I can for you to try and see. It's as close as you're going to get from what I have found, okay, in a store-bought cabinet. I'm also swapping out my sandpaper here, swapping that out, and I'm getting a new piece, same 1000 grit. And also, I just want to show you, see the water? That's all my paint I'm taking off. And I understand if you're new to this, never done cabinets before, never even maybe painted before, like me, you might be freaking out and going, oh my God, this is just not natural feel to doing this. But trust me, after you've done a couple, you sort of get the hang of it and become a little pro yourself. And it's really, really makes a huge, huge difference to the end product. By the way, I started this in January, and it's now March 19th, 2021, and so it took about 2.5 months for my husband and I to go through this process. But it has been we didn't work ourselves crazy, we had other things to do, but it has been extremely rewarding. So now what I'm doing here is I'm also checking the edges. And interestingly enough, I found that the actual edges of the cupboards, I can't talk, right there, the sandpaper never left marks on that, so I never had to repaint anything except the front. And the other thing I do want to say is while I sanded the edges here, didn't have to paint them, I chose not to do the inside of my cupboards all over again. That would have been too time consuming for me, and I just figured that even though they are a little bit rougher, no one's going to see them, so I opted not to do that. Okay, so really, really nice there. Just, you can feel it. Like I said earlier, you'll get to feel of just the motion of it, and when it's resisting the sandpaper and when it's just gliding, like I like to say, like skating, just skating across this piece of wood, painted wood. Scrub, scrub, scrub. Drying is really important. I gave up with I started out using that white pad. I also saw somebody just use a scouring pad, not SOS, just a scouring pad, like a wire pad. But I found, basically, I don't think I needed it. And also, they just kept crumbling on me. So it was just really frustrating. I've been drying with a damp cloth, and I just keep an extra one on hand that's really dry, to always go over it with, make sure it's super, super dry. Okay, now I'm just going to quickly do the edges here for you, and although you probably can figure this one out, just go like this. Just go like that. Took very, very little sanding for me to do. Showing you like that. Being careful to get on the edges there. And I dry these. You can just feel, again, sandpaper should just be gliding. Okay, go like that, dry it off real quick. Then flip my cabinet to this end real quick. It's so worth it. The other thing I want to mention that I did do is I took the extra time, and on my cabinets, vanity in the bathroom, and on my cabinet frame in the kitchen, I wet sanded the trim of each, where every cupboard and drawer was going to go back into place. I took the extra time to sand that down, and it did not need repainting, but it gave it a really nice soft edge, and that's what I wanted. So some people say, when you're working with furniture, that just to wet sand where you're going to touch it, or it's obvious that people are going to see it, or you're going to see it. And here's the thing: what happens once you paint your cabinets, certainly if you've never done them before, it's the natural light. They might look terrific in the evening or in the morning when you have lights on, but it's the natural light that comes in through the day that will show you the true state of your wood and your finish. And personally for me, I had some cabinets that looked okay despite the roughness of the finish, but the daylight showed, natural light showed how uneven the splotches were, and I personally couldn't live with it. I thought this was just way too much work to go to end up with a product I wasn't going to ever really be happy with. So I've just got the one edge left before I set up my painting for it, and I'll show you how to do that too. By the way, if anyone's interested, this is a paint color called Falling Snow by Behr, B-E-H-R. Just love it, and we used it in a different type of paint for our bathrooms, and it's really bright, soft on the eyes, but still bright, and boy, do we love it. Okay, I am finished. Now, before I put all my sanding gear away, I'm just going to go over, this is going to give me an opportunity just to go over. I might feel it, see with my hand, just go over, make sure, feeling in the edges really close here, that everything is great and it's beautiful. And I am super happy with that. Really happy with that. So I'm just going to stop the recording for a bit and I'll see you in a minute when I've got my paint set up and I'm ready to do my final coat. Okay guys, so I'm back for the very final thing, and I got my nice 5mm fiber roller. This is the one I'm going to use, a very thin coat of paint for top, and this is my dry roller. I'm going to come along immediately and scoop up any excess thickness. But I am going to put it on really, really thin. So here's my paint, my beautiful falling snow, and I'm just dipping it, you know, dipping it in here. Give it a good little rub, but I really am keeping this one thin. Slapping it on, not being afraid to slap it on. And my lighting is really not good in my condo here, but at any rate, so a lot of this again is going to be by feel and condition of the cabinet or drawer. So I'm just slapping it on. I'm not worrying too much about the extra care I took when I initially painted the inner edges here with a top quality brush. Just getting that on there. And as soon as I paint, I'm coming along with my dry roller, and I'm just going to go along really light touch, really feather touch. Because if you take too much off, then you're again going to be stuck with those patches. You don't want that. Making sure that you don't have any, look how beautiful that's going on. If you can see that, very nice. You want to cover the sanding marks, but you don't want so much on that it's going to leave the touch and feel that we just sanded off. Don't want that. Going around the edges, remembering do not have to paint, or at least you shouldn't have to paint the edges. Going around the trim, I guess this is trim, of a shaker cabinet. Okay, that's it. I don't want to do any more. No more. And it covered up. Remember I said I had a little tiny bit where I saw the wood, that one little thin coat is covering that up beautifully. I got a little bit in here which I didn't want. So going over that very, very carefully. Just like that, like that. And something I call my skating edges. I go over with the roller on an angle like that. And for you know, I do it on all the coats of paint to catch drips and so on. Okay, so perfect. So I have now finished putting on the top coat. And as saying, just as a reminder, so use one roller for your thin top coat of paint, beautifully on. Take your dry roller, go over it, and at this stage, that's all you have to do. So you're looking at it. If I pick this up and in the close-up lens, I'm going to show you there how absolutely beautiful it looks. You can see some of the shimmer there. Really, really nice. And for you, for this, I'm just showing, it's a little hard to show with this, but I'm so proud of this. And I will cure this now for 1 day because these cupboards have already been curing for 3 weeks. So one thing I want to say is I'm not sure what your curing process is going to be. But again, the steps are whichever you choose, 3 coats, 2 coats. This is the wet sanding method that I have found absolutely life-saving to be able to apply the wet sanding method just before the top coat and hang up cupboards, which in the end look absolutely beautiful. I just want to quickly show you. This is the mate to that cupboard, and this is what it looks like, all done with its handle. And I'll just back up a little bit so you can see that. And so the effect is absolutely beautiful in natural light. And well, I will be honest and say there are some cupboards that in my kitchen I'm still looking at, and you can still see a few of the patches. This top coat still has to cure for another say 3 weeks, 4 weeks, before I'll really get to see what the final product is, and it will probably keep curing over time for a few months. So anyway, happy wet sanding. I hope that helps. One last thing I want to say is I'm not sure what this method would be like for painting, say, other types of wood. So this is specific to a particle wood with a melamine overcoat, and I had just tremendous success. So thanks for watching. Happy painting.